For centuries, the mystics, the very spiritually attuned people, have claimed that love is the ultimate reality, that love underlies everything visible and invisible, everything seen and everything unseen. That love sustains the universe, that love preceded all the laws and constants of physics, that somehow, and this is a hard thing to get your head around, everything is an expression of love. Now, what does science say about this? It's interesting that a lot of physicists, about half of physicists, believe in some kind of infinite intelligence, some kind of pure mind that underlies the mathematical ordering of the universe, that underlies the principles of thermodynamics. You know, in classical theological terms, if you look at world religions, many world religions say that in the beginning was the Word. In the beginning, there was no universe. The universe had a beginning, the Big Bang, we call it. But before the Big Bang, as the Hindus tell us, there was the Godhead. There was this infinite love that was beyond time, there was no time, and that was beyond space. Suddenly, the Big Bang unfolds. The Hindus say that the reason why the universe came into existence and why the universe was fine-tuned, and so that eventually creatures like ourselves could come into existence who could connect with the divine, was because God was playful. God wanted to see that divine love manifest freely in our lives, independent, if you will, of divine authority. And so for the Hindus, our purpose in life is creative love. Not only does love underlie all the universe, it is the very ground of being. It is in the quantum realities. You know, this sounds like a crazy idea, but it's no crazier than, say, string theory in physics, which gets pretty wild. You know, everything we see around us is at a quantum level, flickering in and out of existence. All these little particles, some of them just last a 15th of a second, and then they evaporate and are replaced. You think the world around us is stable. It's like, you know, a British still life portrait. You know, there's the cow, there's the barn, there's the field, you know, there's the apple tree. Everything looks so stable, but at a deeper level, at a quantum level, it's a kind of seething, boiling, constant flux of energy and matter, and those two things are indistinguishable. So when you reflect on ultimate reality, what the mystics call the ground of being, it's not unreasonable to assert that that energy could be the energy of unlimited love, that pure creative energy. Will anybody ever prove this? Not now. Maybe in 100 years, maybe in 200 years. But I am encouraged because so many fine mathematicians and fine physicists will at least discuss the possibility. You know, if you look at psychiatrists and social scientists, a lot of them are complete atheists, about 80%. But if you look at physicists, a majority of them believe that there is some mysterious underlying creative energy that precedes the Big Bang and that sustains the world around us. So I think that's interesting. Physics and mysticism are coming together. You can go to any bookstore and read thoughtful comments. You know, Einstein himself said that God does not play dice with the universe. He thought there was something going on here that is profound and not easy to measure. You know, it's interesting. There was a famous experiment called the Michelson-Morley experiment that really goes back to about 1900. And it was really the beginning of modern physics. Morley was a chemist and a physicist, but he was also an ordained Protestant minister. And he wrote a phenomenal paper called God and the Chemical Bond. And somehow he believed that the chemical bond, because of entropy and so forth, was impossible to explain without the coherent energy of divine love. Okay, look, this is hard to swallow, and I'm not trying to push the point. I just want us to be open-minded about it. That's all. Many physicists do take the view that the universe is fine-tuned, that somehow it is set up, that's a language that you hear, it is set up to give rise to life and ultimately to give rise to sophisticated life forms that are capable of that kind of creative engagement with divine love. I'm not trying to ask everybody to believe this today, but I don't think we can ignore it. You know, it's one thing to talk about love as a practice. It's good to talk about unselfish behavior, about generosity, about a shared humanity. But it's another thing, it's a little deeper to think that maybe love is in the very mortar of everything we see. It's just in the brick, in the cement. It's in it somehow. And that everything comes from that love. When Sir John Templeton was dying, this was one of my great philanthropic friends and supporters, and I knew him for 15 or 18 years. When he was dying, several weeks before he died, this was in the summer of 2008, he said to his son, Dr. John Templeton Jr., Dr. Jack Templeton, he said, you know, there's a book I'd like to write, but I'm dying. I'm not going to have a chance to write it. Would you ask Stephen, me, to write it for me? And give him a title. Here it is. Is ultimate reality unlimited love? ? Sir John died. And I thought about this because Jack reported it to me. And I didn't touch it for 3 years. So from 2008 to 2011, I just ignored this request. But one morning I was driving out across Pennsylvania and I was on Route 80 and I went through the Delaware Water Gap, which is really beautiful. And the sun was rising. And I pulled over and I called Jack on my flip phone. And I said, Jack, you know that book your dad wanted me to write? I'm going to write it. because I know that your dad really believed ultimately in some kind of reconciliation between this mysticism of love and the physics and mathematics of the universe. So I actually wrote a book called Is Ultimate Reality Unlimited Love? Question mark. And it's out with the John Templeton Press. It's got a lot of letters from Sir John to me. Sir John liked to fax. He didn't email. He was a little too old for emailing. So he would fax me great letters. He'd say, you know, we started this institute for the study of unlimited love, and I gave you a bunch of money for it. But let's not be arrogant. Let's not just study human love, because human love is a very limited enterprise. Human beings can be nasty creatures. In fact, we're all a little nasty, if I'm not mistaken. But he said, how about devoting at least 1/3 of all these resources, not to mere human love, but to the love that made humans? That was Sir John, you know. And since I cared a lot about him, I did that. Now, it's a little controversial, but on the other hand, let's recognize if you go across the globe, for Hindus, this idea is perfectly acceptable. For many Buddhists, this idea of an ultimate energy is perfectly acceptable. For Eastern Orthodox Christians, it's perfectly acceptable. For Sufi Muslims, this is perfectly acceptable. You read any of the great Sufi writers today, like Syed Nasr, for example, and they all talk about this love underlying reality. So it's a bit of a strange idea, admittedly, to sort of, you know, the Western mind. But if you look more broadly, it's something that people believe could very well be the case. My book doesn't resolve it. It's not meant to be a proof, but it does suggest the plausibility, the reasonableness of at least asking the question. Is ultimate reality unlimited love? Question mark.